Hello and good morning. It is 10:30 a.m. It's Sunday morning, and that means that it is time for Sunday Club. And every week we do some Ruby on Rails live streaming, and we build an app together. It's an app that will kind of build a little website for live streamers, YouTube channels, and Twitch channels. So hello, thank you for checking in on our live stream. And first thing I want to talk about is some follow-up from last week. Kind of just a random list of stuff, and then I want to crack straight into some code sort of follow-up-ish from the last few weeks. So a couple of things. I have ordered a new microphone because at the end of last week's stream, the mic cut out for the last few minutes, which is incredibly frustrating. And you will, as usual, hear me checking the stream a couple times during this. You can see me reaching for my phone now to do that, and it is really frustrating having to do that and having to go and sort the link, and you can see me clicking through now and load it up on a different device just so that I can check it. And it's because there is an issue with my current microphone that cuts out every once in a while, and I've googled around and other people have the same issue. Yeah, my voice is coming through, so that's good. And so I've just ordered a new mic, so that will be here this afternoon. So I think what I'm going to do is this afternoon is another stream, potentially either around, probably around the front-end design. If we're going to talk around front-end stuff today, let's talk around front-end design, maybe use Figma because I've kind of always used Sketch, so let's get into some Figma and make things look cool. So some other follow-up, massive thank you, really, I guess, to the View Component team who saw last week's stream where we were talking about View Component and going through the docs and setting it up and getting our first little component working. And I'll put a link to this in, actually I'll put it in the chat now on YouTube, and then I will put it in the episode notes on YouTube as well. And it is some notes they made on the experience of going through the docs. And I was just kind of talking out loud as I was going through them, and I think I was just speaking a stream of consciousness, but they were kind of interested in that, and are going to potentially make some adjustments to their docs based on what I was just verbalizing. Again, it's only my thoughts off the top, which is really good. So new mic, stuff from View Component. And let's jump straight into some code, shall we? So let's go take a look at what I found just before this. I tweeted just before this stream that I had found something, and I wanted to go take a look at it, especially from a learner's perspective. It's about testing. So let's load up some code here. Bring that up on screen. Cool. So we want to talk about testing, and I found this while I was rebasing I'm just loading these tests up. Between every episode now, I've been trying to rebase I'm in the wrong place. I've been trying to rebase the work in progress branch just so that we can have something a bit more manageable. I haven't set anything up on this machine. So it's just prep stuff. Great. That is not the spec. Sorry, I'm trying to talk and prep this at the same time. So just get this test failure up. So I've been trying to rebase the work in progress branch, and also tidy things up and make them into pull requests on GitHub. So we are making okay progress on that, but there is an open pull request at the moment, number 7. And what I had done is just gone through, and if you remember a few streams ago, we were looking at this and kind of grouping, I think it was in Homework Edition, we were grouping the themes of the big long branch together and then turning them into pull requests. And then we were going to make the pull request and then merge it as we went through. Now the problem is on this one, is our test failed, and I was pointing out last week that this is really good because now we know, because the GitHub action that we set up on a previous stream runs and we know the test fails. Super useful. So, sorry, I'm choking a little bit this morning. So the test was failing, and I mentioned that we had found the solution to this in some streams running later, and so in some commits that were later on in that branch. Now, I cherry picked them over. I'm gonna use source tree again, even though I know the font size can't be changed, so it doesn't show up too well if I just open up source tree and bring it onto this window. So here is the reason that I show this one. It is because it has this kind of handy view. If you can see these kind of blue dots, I'm hoping these are big enough. These kind of blue dots represent here, they represent master, and then I've rebased our install pundit. That's the name of that branch. These little blue blobs here are the tags representing each branch. And so I've rebased that onto master. And there were some commits up here. This red one is our current work in progress branch. And there were some commits up here like fix testing stuff. I can't remember what they did. Fix test for suspensions controller, add properties to user factory, add warden helpers for Aspect, Rails helper. So I needed these. And what source tree does is help us visualize this, but also it's giving me like a little one-click cherry pick option, so I could just grab those out and pop them onto my new branch. So I put these three over, these little helping commits that I wanted, because there's no reason. I only bumped into those test failures up here on I think between the streams even. I think I fixed it off stream, and then I was like, oh, the test still fails, and so I ran the test that fails. So where's terminal gone? Here, so I ran the test that fails, and it still failed. So I have fixed this, so I know where we're going with this, so we're not going to debug this live. But I thought the failure was interesting, especially from a learner's perspective. So basically what we're testing here, let's just close this so we can bring this up on screen, is this create action on the suspensions controller, but it's a namespaced suspensions controller. So it's control panel, channels, suspensions controller. So if I was to see that, I would assume that the action, the resource upon which we are working is the suspension. That's the thing that is being acted upon. That is under the namespace of channels. So odds are we are suspending a channel. So again, you're looking from a learner's perspective of making that obvious what's happening. And then that's within the namespace of control panel. And I'm going to infer from that that's our admin area. So those would all be pretty, hopefully self-explanatory. And we are creating a suspension. So it would be the equivalent of having a suspend action within our channels controller, but don't really like doing that, so I have created a suspensions controller and have a create action on it. So the test is within the context of the create action, it should suspend the channel. So just literally calling it should suspend the channel. And there's not a lot of logic going on. And this was the fix. Line 10 was the fix that got that working. So I obviously in another life got this working with line 10. So I cherry picked the commit and line 10 suddenly appeared. And the test still fails. So I'm like, okay, something's going wrong. So I run the test and we get the failure. Let me just bring those over to here. Bear with me just a second, just make it easier for me to switch between the apps. There we go. So I bring this up and I get nothing on the failure. So the first thing I want to know is, where are we hitting? Like, where do we get up to? So one of the things I tend to do is I have a keyboard shortcut that just puts out these just to visually see them in terminal. I use that literally as a dumb, does this code get run kind of check. It's not hugely clever or snazzy or anything, but it gets the job done. So what I look for is, when I run the test, do I get that output anywhere? And the answer is no. So I know that we're not actually hitting the create action. So something in a before action or somewhere else is preventing us from ever getting there. So there's no point in changing, or there's no point in worrying that the update isn't happening, or that's why we're not actually suspending the channel. We never actually run this code as far as we can see. So, okay, something's going wrong. So it could be something in our before action, but we're pretty happy with that because it's not doing anything crazy. Maybe the next thing I would do is put some debugging code in there and see if channel was being set. That would be pretty logical thing to do next. But I didn't do that because I was pretty confident that this was working. And so the thing that caught my eye around the work that we were doing when we did that fix was that we were doing the work to implement this base controller from which all of the other control panels inherit. So I loaded this up, and the issue here is that we have this authenticate user, which means, hey, you're going to need to be logged in. We're not checking which user you are. We're literally saying we just want a user at this point. That's what this call from Devise does. You can go back and check out the previous streams where we implement Devise if you're interested in that. And so that's why we needed this line to be here when we cherry picked that in. That's why the test broke. We had a test that worked. We implemented authenticate user and the test failed. So at some point I fixed that test by implementing line 10. And I was like, oh, cool. But it doesn't work. So why doesn't it work? And the reason it doesn't work popped into my head because we've been bumping into it on previous streams. And in fact, we bumped into it at the end of last week's stream when the mic cut out a little bit. What was actually happening is we bumped into the exact issue that we found here. And it is that I'm going to tell you what the issue is, and then I'm going to tell you why I think this is interesting from a learner's perspective. The issue is that Devise, with the config that we set it up with, and I think it's the default config, I'd have to go back and check that stream, doesn't allow access at all for unconfirmed users. So even though you create your account, if you don't confirm your account, which in Devise by default is the kind of, you get an email, you click on the link in the email, that takes you to a Devise controller that sets the confirmed at timestamp in your user record or whatever resource you're using as your Devise resource. It says, hey, this has been confirmed, and then you can allow access. So by default, that is, we require that immediately. You can't actually use the account you set up until you have confirmed it. Now, why is that relevant to this test? It's relevant because we're creating the user and we're signing them in, but we don't sign them in because they've never been confirmed. And because we're setting it up using a factory, that is not very visible. And the tricky thing about that is the failure itself isn't very visible because we're using this sign underscore in helper from the Devise gem. So we actually have something in that commit where we add this in. Yeah, I think if I can do that in here, so it should be one of the more recent commits. Did I move back to... Okay, I moved back to the other gem, so it might be further down. Back to the other branch, sorry. So it will be something like... I think I added it on this... Add warden helpers here. So in this line here... Oh, that's very tiny. Let's see. Can we just run it across the... Chuck those in here and get rid of this one on the right for a second. We don't need the split screen. So in here, in our this is in our Rails helper for our tests. We added in this config include Devise test controller helpers, and that gave us in our test this little sign-in helper. And so it's the actual problem we're having is we're not actually being signed in because the user was never confirmed. And the way I got there quickly because I bumped into the issue when we were just debugging things just in the Rails browser recently. It happened a few times, so I was just like, oh, yep, fair enough. Again, you can check back on previous streams to see us bump into that. But how would I have found this normally? So the process I was going through where I put in that little puts call to see where the code was hitting, I would do the same thing kind of for the test. So seeing, like, start going through line by line. So sign in user we create. So basically, does this create the user? So check that we have the user. Sign in. So are they signed in? Try a different action here. Does it work there? It wouldn't have worked because we're not actually confirmed, so it wouldn't have worked. So it's not just the code under test that is worth checking if you're having a problem. It is also the code in the test that is worth checking and stepping through and saying, right, is my assumption about this correct? And I think there'll be some things on the whatever this helper is doing that you can check from memory. There's some stuff you can kind of say, is this user signed in? And I thought that was so I thought that was a really interesting way to bump into it. So what are we going to do about that, and why did it pass? Well, it passed because I had updated that setting, which is every week we have been doing this when we've been doing the front end stuff. We've been coming in here and it's called something like allow. I think it's unconfirmed. Yep, so we've been coming in and changing this setting just manually. So what I'd obviously done is change this to something like allow unconfirmed access for 2 years and then run the test. So I think if I now run that test, I think it might pass. Yep, which is great. So it's not great, but it's great that we found the issue. What's crappy about that is that we don't want... we don't really want our test to change based on that. We really want to know, we want to test that that is correct for our sites. We do want a test checking that something, that access isn't allowed. But what we also want is our test not to be affected by that. We only want to test that setting in a test specific to know that that setting is set correctly. And then we want our other tests to say, hey, I know what's going on here. So what I would normally do in this situation is say, well, we know that we don't want unconfirmed people to be able to access that. So maybe there would be a kind of a shared spec that checked all of the controllers to say, don't allow unconfirmed access for this. I don't really want to go straight into setting up shared examples in this stream because I don't really want to spend too long on testing. But what we can also do is make the test run so that we know that this won't be an issue by making the user confirmed. And so I'm gonna just look at how we do that. So this is going to be my fix for this in the short term. So we know we've got this this factory of a user. Cool. So this is our user, and they are who we're signing in. And they're not confirmed. So what we really need to do is set this value of confirmed. That's how Devise knows whether the user has been confirmed. We don't really care how this is set. Now, the problem of setting it here on the factory is that it will then become the default behavior. So we would then have to explicitly set this as nil every time we didn't want an unconfirmed user. And my best experience with factories has been to set the default factory, so in this case user, as the barest minimum mandatory only fields with kind of the most vanilla default settings, and in everything else force the test to opt into it or set a different factory or use a trait or something like that. So what we're going to do is use a trait here, and a trait, if you're new to using factories, is really worth looking up. So we're just going to call this confirmed, and what this will allow us to do is say, okay, well, we want a user, but we want a confirmed user, so we know that this has been set. So then what we can do is come back to our well, let's go in order. Let's change our setting back, so this can go back to here, and in here we can then say, right, well, we know we wanted a user, but what we actually want is a confirmed user. And again, I'm just doing this in line, but we could realistically have, we could do this. So I'm just showing how, because we're basically giving ourselves the room then to test in another context with an unconfirmed user, it shouldn't happen. Again, I wouldn't write that test per controller. Our spec provides some ways of providing shared functionality. So if I did want to check that every time, that would not be something I would write by hand every time. You could simply have a test that looked at all of the controllers in a certain folder or namespace or however you chose to do it, and then ran the test on those. I wouldn't write it every time. Although you still need the setup, so you could just have you would just have like a, it behaves like a controller that doesn't allow unconfirmed access or something like that. Okay, so that's another way of, this is basically another way of writing what we already have, but we've now added the confirmed trait. It should suspend the channel. So I think I've done that right. And remember, we've changed that setting back. So if this now passes, it means we have fixed that issue with the test being affected by the setting. And also we can clear that visibility code out from there. So we've got our pass there. Now we had one other failure. So let's run the rest of our tests. Yep, so we've got another one, and hopefully we're going to find the same thing. So this is just in the channels controller. So let's go take a look at that. Okay, so we've got this sign in user again. We've already got the user being created here. Let's just pop that in. Let's be super optimistic and wonder if it's the same issue. So I'm literally just putting in the trait that we just made into there, and we're going to run the same test again. Great. So it's the same issue. So why do we care about this at all? Well, so the problem is that setting could be changed in the future. So you might have a product change where they're like, oh, actually, we do want people to access different areas of this, access all of the areas for the site for a week before they have to confirm their email address. What you would probably want to do is be more explicit than that. Just in my experience on more complex apps, if you do allow unconfirmed access, it might only be to the kind of getting started area, which tells people that they have to confirm their user. And in that case, you can kind of explicitly allow different behavior and things like that. So that fixes our test for now, and it's something we have to bear in mind. But we basically want to have that check in place. I was just thinking about how you would do that. So essentially, you could then say, because will Devise sign you in at all? No, I don't think it won't sign you in at all until you get confirmed access. So maybe you have to allow. God, I'm going to look at code. I'm not going to get too hung up on that, but I can't remember the exact mechanism for that. But I know that I have allowed areas of certain sites before a user has done a thing. So I've obviously been checking that they're not confirmed, but obviously they have to have been able to sign in by that point. So presumably we do allow some. I can't remember. If you're interested in that, then ping me, and I'll look it up for you, and we can kind of look at that in another episode. I think actually that would be interesting for an episode. We've done our onboarding, so maybe we allow access to the onboarding, but maybe we don't allow it past there. Okay, that actually has piqued my interest. I'm just going to go and look in another browser window. Bear with me because I can't show all of the code all of the time on here. An older project of mine that I use Devise on, so bear with me. Config initialize as Devise. Okay, so it has a value on there, and then we obviously have tests, shared examples that look for the confirmation. Yeah, I'd be interested in kind of different ways of doing that. Okay, so that is, I'm going to commit this. We're going to be super diligent because it helps me. So I'm just going to do all of this, I guess. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So we're going to commit this. We're going to say update user factory with confirmed trait and use in test. And again, we're going to be a bit more diligent with our commit messages, so that when we're rebasing, we can either use the commit message or we can ignore it, and but at least we'll have more context when we're rebasing. So these tests were failing as Devise would not allow the to log They use sign in, don't they? To sign in while unconfirmed. This trait allows us to specify a confirmed user, and we're in some specs. Okay, that'll do. So that's on the current work in progress. So I can rebase that over to the other branch as well. Cool. Okay, cool. So tests fixed. Like I said, I've ordered a new mic, so I think what we might do this afternoon is try and rebase that over. I've got a thing at 2. Oh, where are we now? It's nearly 11 a.m. and we could potentially get that pull request at least working. So I might do some more streaming later today just to have more Git stuff. What I'm going to do now, before we move on to the next thing, is check the stream, because I'm so paranoid after last week the mic cut out, which was not good. What we might do this afternoon. That's me talking. Great, that's still working. Cool. Okay, so let's go and do some more front end stuff. Test parsing. No, she knows. Take that back down. Okay, so the test parsing, we've got that working on there. Let's start a server. See where we got to. And what I'm really interested in is we had our Tailwind forms working at the end of a couple of streams ago, which was pretty great. Cool, so let's go take a look at, yes, okay, great. And I think what we did was, yes, we formatted this using Tailwind. So there's a good, if you're interested, we're gonna do some Tailwind again today. And if you're interested in that, I'm gonna maybe make a playlist of episodes where we've touched Tailwind stuff, because it's kind of been scattered through. But I want to get back to this a little bit, and what I'm interested in is setting things up so that all of the pages start to look the same. And the thing that stuck in my mind from Tailwind CSS is where we copied and pasted over that giant page header from their website, and they had like some example components you can use. Can't. Is that the tail? Ready-made components. Here we go. Is this what we were looking at? Yep. So we grabbed one of these, I think, and it was pretty cool. I literally just copied and pasted it over. Hero section, was this it? Yes, it was this one. So we copied and pasted this code, and it was just like exactly the same on our site, which is pretty cool. But what I'm interested in is how we make that more repeatable. So for example, let's say that we want our buttons to look like this. How do we make that happen all the time? Because we don't want to be obviously having to remember the magic incantation of CSS classes that gets us the right button every time. So we want to have, and they have this syntax, which I think is like the @apply syntax, I think is theirs. And it kind of lets you mix them together to do stuff like that, I think. And I was wondering how that then played into, we then had the form plugin that we installed recently to get this working. And I'm not 100% sure what that did. And also, how do we get, oops. So let's say that, why doesn't that go back quickly? Oh, is it because we're using turbo links or something? Like, are we not? Oh, okay, let's super crash that tab. Okay, cool. So if I go from here and I'm on the root URL and I go to there, okay, can I go back? No. Weird. Why does the root page not show up in my page history? Okay, let's not worry about that. Okay, that's not what I wanted to talk about, but that's super weird. Are we using turbo links for this? I'll say yes, probably, because this is a vanilla Rails site. Okay, so let's skip step 3, but we want to that's okay. So let's say we've got a button. Oh my god, that's annoying already. So we've got a button here, and we want to add a button onto this page, and we want them to be the same. So we want to kind of create this shared visual CSS framework from within our own CSS framework. So that's where I want to go today, and make sure that if we were to put something like one of these templates over and we knew we needed these buttons to be one of our buttons, we could kind of just put button in or something like that. So we know we can reuse components, but make them reusable everywhere. By the way, I'm sure this is totally a thing in Tailwind. I'm new to it, so if you go back through the streams, I'm learning this as we go. So that's why I think this might be useful. I have never used this before on a project, so everything I'm coming to in Tailwind is for the first time. So I'm sure these are really simple, straightforward things that I just don't have the experience of. I've come from things either so like Bootstrap for a long time. I think we've talked about this before. Foundations, Zerb's foundation thingy, a bunch of other ones, custom made ones, and then more recently React design frameworks where everything is a component and you have to know the component you need, not the CSS classes on the HTML elements you need, which is a whole other way of thinking altogether. You just don't really care about the DOM that comes out from them because you're just building your entire UI out of components and then occasionally reaching for some vanilla HTML, which again is still in React, so it still doesn't have the same syntax. So it's actually really nice to get back to just HTML. Okay, so let's go take a look at our views. Let's get into it, shall we? So this is what we were working on before. So it's views, site setup, details. So this is the one that's got Tailwind in, so I'm still getting used to this syntax. Okay, so this is an example of what I was talking about. If we just hide that, like this part here, company website, that's this box here, and this is a lot going on. Like, and if we use that a lot, I don't really want to have to do that every time. So that's really what I want to try and avoid. If that's the Tailwind way, and the idea is that you put this input in a partial or view component or something with these as arguments that you pass in, maybe that's the way. And then you would actually say, something component, and then you could pass in type and like ID and stuff. Placeholder. I mean that actually is a bit more like the kind of React UI. I can spell component. But and then you would have then a partial or something that contained this code simply so you didn't have to write this every time. Is that what people are doing? I have to watch other people's streams about Tailwind. We could just do a cascading set of streams. So I'll watch people that have used it way more than me. I'll use it a little bit, and then as people watch this, they can kind of come up, and we'll all move through that journey together of learning stuff. Okay, so let's put a button in then. So we know we've got a button on our homepage as well. So let's use a button as a simple example of something we want to reuse. So here, okay, so this is all buttony. Got two UIs here. One is this one, and then we'll make a new tab, and we'll just put our input in there. So this button here, we want one on here. So we just need it to be a link. We don't need it to. Oh no, actually, yeah, we didn't build that form out. We don't need to worry about that today. Let's just make it a link. So link to step 3. But what we'll do is we'll make this the submit button, as if it. Okay, so what I'm assuming I can do is copy all of these and have the same button. Oops, still got my junk code in there. That was just an example. They call their tool component driven. Hello, White Wizard Web. I'm reading the Tailwind CSS site and I think you're on the right path. They call their tool component driven. Okay, that's interesting. Component driven. So is there a mechanism? So I'm going to totally ask a follow-up question. Have you seen anything is there a mechanism in Tailwind to do this? Or is it that you put it in your own type of components? Like if you're using React, it goes in React. If you're using Vue component, yeah, I'm guessing that kind of makes sense. You handled that part yourself. Vue components crusher. So that's Tailwind UI. IDE. Sorry, I'm totally just scrolling up. Component driven. Here we go. Excellent. Thank you for the pointer. Right. So React, Vue, and Blade. Never heard of Blade. I think the first time I saw that was maybe when we looked at these docs the first time. If you're repeating the same utilities over and over again, all you have to do is extract them into a component or template partial, and boom, you've got a single source of truth, so you can make changes in one place. Okay. Tailwind encourages a utility-first workflow where designs are initially implemented using only utility classes to avoid premature abstraction. Yeah, bring your own, I think, is a good way to describe that, actually. BYO component framework. Yeah, the wording gets... Everything is a component framework, but depending on what type of components you're... Oh, God. Anyone who watched last week watched me try and describe what React is. It is literally a thing I use day to day and was unable to articulate what it is. So just keep saying component until everyone starts nodding. But as a project grows, you'll inevitably find yourself repeating common utility combinations. Let me bump the font size up on this. You'll inevitably find yourself repeating common utility combinations to recreate the same component in many different places. This is most apparent with small components like buttons, form elements, badges, etc. Button, blah, blah, blah. Keeping a long list. Okay, it's painful. Good idea to extract. Don't rely on CSS classes to extract components. Okay, so that's just that's just normal, like that could maybe like BEM syntax or something like that. Okay, so don't do it the non-Tailwind way, do it the... Okay, yeah, sure. Create a template partial or JavaScript component. Okay, so this goes back very much to the Vue component stuff we were looking at last week. I think maybe in my mind, this is about making the components even more focused. So I think in my mind I was thinking like you would have, because you've got Tailwind, you wouldn't need to have an individual Vue component necessarily that was a button, and then that could be surrounded by like a button row. You know, I'm thinking of like the normal React stuff you get, like button row, you know, basically where you get like an individual component, then how do we group them, and the outer component handles the layout of them, and then that one sits in a thing that handles the layouts of layout type things. But maybe that is how you end up with Vue component. I was thinking maybe with Tailwind you could be more within the you could have the component, and then within that just use the utility classes to get you where you needed to go. But again, you do lose that reusability if you don't use a component. Okay, I'm just thinking this through from a first time Tailwind user's perspective. So, just thinking out loud about that, then there's if you're still relying on the component framework, React, Vue component, partials, whatever it is you're using, you're still reusing things that you could still... Right, sorry, I'm thinking out loud on on the stream. Even though it's utility first, you're still using those utilities in such a narrow scope that you could... Does that limit the value you're getting from having like a button class or something like that? You're still putting whatever this is, 20, 30 ones, you're just putting them in a component somewhere. You could still just have a CSS file called button. I understand that there's like reusability aspects of compressing the CSS, but most sites aren't that big. If you're running something like Purge CSS or something, and you're compressing the CSS as well, like, are you really generating that much CSS that if utilities? The other thing that React gets you is also CSS modules, where you are generating the CSS for that as you render the components. So you actually don't need anything global whatsoever. So does that take away some of the value? If you're using CSS modules in React, do you still get the benefit of Tailwind? I'm assuming you potentially do, but maybe I have a blind spot around that. If you haven't, for learners or anyone else watching the stream, so if you're using CSS modules in React, you can put a, let's say your component is called widget.jsx or tsx or whatever it is, and then you have a file in the same directory that's like widget.modules.scss. That CSS is just for that component, and then you bring in other global components you want that bring in their own CSS modules, and basically as React renders the component, it will put the right styling attributes on it, and it only builds what it needs to render that page. And I think it happens when it renders it. But basically you then don't need global CSS. It just takes that aspect away, because as long as you're building with components that already have their own CSS modules, it's got everything it needs. And maybe there's one global like normalize or something like that. So I'm throwing out more questions than I'm answering anything here. So extracting component classes with apply. Okay. So this comes back to where I thought we were going more. So for small components like creating a template partial JavaScript component and not feel too heavy compared to a simple CSS class. So in these situations, you can use Tailwind's apply directive to easily extract comment. Okay, so here's what button indigo class might look like. Okay, cool. Right, so I think let's try and get there. Let's try and get here today. Let's try and get our own set of applies. In addition to writing component classes directly in your CSS files, you can also add component classes by writing your own plugin. Right, so I'm assuming that this is what that forms plugin was doing, and instead of using classes, it was simply styling default browser elements. Okay. Right, let's get some apply stuff running. So we've got a button over here, and we have okay, so this one I assume is not a link. It's an input. Okay. And this one is a link. So the same Tailwind classes are not being applied in the same way. I kind of thought the whole point was that they should work. I'm just checking. So it starts with rounded LG and ends with shadow MD. Yeah, so we've got all the same classes on there. And let's take a look. Where is the color coming from this? So here. Can you see this on the screen? Yeah, cool. And it will be background color. Okay, that's not being set. I thought BG teal 500%. That has been blue at some point. Did that change in the... What is dash? Oh, okay, so teal 500 was one of the color references. Did that change in this, in the 2 and 2.0 teal? If you're already using a custom color palette, okay, so yes, the default color, so we upgraded Tailwind from version 1 to Tailwind version 2. We hadn't used it too much. The default color palette has changed considerably in version 2 and is not designed to be a drop-in replacement for the color palette that was included in V1. Okay, well, we don't need the one we were using. We don't care. So let's just use the new one. What is the new one? We do not recommend updating existing sites to use the new... okay, be like that. The numbers are not meant to be transferable. Okay, well, we've only got 2 buttons in the whole site, so I think we're good. The numbers are not meant to be transferable. So, for example, BG Red 600 and V2 is not just a better version of BG Red 600 from version 1. It has a different contrast characteristics. If you're happy with how your site looks, there's no reason to spend hours overlap updating your HTML. The old colors are great too. That's an interesting break for them to make. Like, I guess the whole idea of these utility first is it would still be a kind of find and replace giant. You know, it wouldn't take too long. Okay, so where are the new colors? How do I get that? Colors, here we go. Okay, so what we want is... Oh, well, this is what I'm going to do this afternoon. We'll have our own fancy colors this afternoon when I get my new microphone, and we can do some work in Figma and work out how the hell that works. This one looks pretty similar to what we were looking at. We've got kind of a pink vibe going on for Sunday Club because it's cherry, because there was a cherry on the Sunday. So I think we just do red-400. That's down here. Okay, so I'm going to copy that and put it on this one as well. Oh, I see. Hang on. So then on hover, it gets dark. Okay, so... Okay, let's just do one and then copy and paste it over. BG Red 400. Oh man, you've got to use applies and components, because if you had to change these all over the place, you'd go crazy. Okay, so then we can do BG Red 500. Any other mentions of red along here? No, I think we're good. I think maybe what I would do is, if I did do this all the time, is like make sure that they were all something like you'd put all the sizing ones on one row, just thinking out loud here. Then maybe you would do all color-based things. Then maybe you do all text-based things, like just to give yourself something to latch onto when you did have to look at these long rows, like always doing them in a consistent order, just something to give yourself a starting point. Although I guess the argument would be is that if once you're up and running, how often are you really delving into these long lines? Like, you only really care when you're setting them up. If you've built good enough components and they're flexible on the layout, you only really need to be adjusting the ones you're working. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Okay, so let's grab these. This is like, it's supposed to be Ruby on Rails live streaming, but the last kind of front end episodes have all been very Tailwind based, which I don't mind too much. We'll get back to, we're not running out of Rails. So let's refresh these. Cool. Okay, check out our massive button. And when I hover, it goes darker. Super exciting. It does overlap somewhat. So that's the padding, I would assume. Okay. So why is the text-based Excel? Oh, is that just because I grabbed out a giant button? Sorry, I was just looking at the line height of that. So on the homepage it makes sense because I do want a giant button, but on this one, so XL text base and text base is setting the line height there. And text dash is line height. Surely that's line dash height. Oh, they actually use leading on that. I do find that a little interesting. So very often the Tailwind API is close to the CSS itself. And then very often, like, there's no concept of letting in CSS. It's just line height. But then that's the format being used here. Okay. But when I look at line height, it does say it's being set to... Oh, okay. Is that just being set somewhere in that default theme? But it's being set as one of the text values? Okay, I'm not really sure how to find that out. But we can change one of these padding values here, so we don't need this to be quite as huge. So I've got to try and remember this. So padding. Come on, let's try and read this together. Okay, so this is PX is padding left and right. MDPX is on the medium viewport size. Padding left and right will go up, will be increased. And on the largest screen size, it will go back down. PY, that's padding top and bottom, starts at 3. On the medium viewport, it will go up to 4. And on the largest viewport, it will go back down to 3. So those 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 handle padding. I don't know quite why we needed to go back in size, so I think we grab that from there. Thanks. Can we just kill those two just to keep our lives simpler? So here, and then presumably we would have something like button small or something. Okay, so we've still got a smaller button. And let's just adjust. So let's put this in its own container. Okay, so again, this would then potentially become a view component like centered button, or you would make a button container component that had an attribute that was horizontal alignment, something like that. Okay, and then this would then be text center align. Fucking, I can't remember. I can't remember. Okay, you must have to spend ages. Is it just text align center? No, text center. Okay. And then this by default is inline. And you can just do that so that itself is centered. I'm not exactly sure. That will do what I think it does. It does do. Okay, and I want some thing below that, so well, that could go there. And then it would be, if you want margin on the bottom of something, that is so MX is margin left and right, and Y is margin, and they just have an integer value that represents that kind of system they use of scaling up. Is it MB for margin bottom? Oops. Yes, okay. B8. Okay, so then okay. And the advantage of, and then that itself could have. So the advantage of using these numbers is that you know you're always being, you've got the same relative gaps every time. So you could do that as well, and that will give you some space here, I think. Okay, and that will take you through to edges. Okay, starting to get my head around that a little bit more. I can remember some of the CSS class names, so I'm pretty happy with that. So we have a big button and we have a small button. Small button no longer change sizes on different viewports, whereas this one we think does. So that's gone up in size there, down in size there, up, down. And presumably we could have some sort of equivalent size change on this on this text input if we wanted to match it. Okay. That's really jerky when moving over. I'm not sure if that's a Safari thing. So let's make an apply. Okay, so this is all happening now inside JavaScript because that's what Tailwind uses, and we have this application CSS. So we have 3 inputs: base, components, and utilities, which I think we need all of. We then have forms coming in via Tailwind config. Why can't forms come in through here? Presumably because it also brings in JavaScript stuff, I would guess. That is a total guess. I have no idea if that's the case. Okay, so we're already using a couple of applies. Can we break these out? Because we don't really want one long one. How would one have... Can we do this? And then do... Okay, and then in here, now what the hell was at layer base for? Right, was that so you could tell it where to put these in? Okay, so we want that to be base as well. So these set the base over which the components and the utilities are. Okay. No idea if this is going to work, but let's see what's going to happen. So in here, we're then going to have btn. Is our class. And can we then do, when it had apply, yes, you can put them all on one line. So can we then take our small button here, have all of that, replace that with button, and put all of that here. I don't know if that's just my syntax highlighter hating that, because this was this non-standard Sass, but it doesn't matter because this isn't going to be rendered by Sass. This isn't going to be processed by Sass. It's going to be processed by the Tailwind being compiled, I think. Does that work / do anything at all? So Webpacker is compiling our new stuff. Did it work? Wow, okay. So that is calling .btn. And .btn gets spat out as the root properties, and then with each class that was prefixed with a viewport, so that's the MDXL, you get the appropriate media query. So this will be the MD one, this will be the XL or whatever that one was, and doing what that does. And so we think the font size should change. Is that correct? One. Yeah. Oh yeah, just there, very slightly. It gets ever. It's not worth it. It gets ever so slightly. I don't even know if you'll see that on the stream. Let me bump the. Watch the submit button here. There. Is that yeah. What's the computed value? 18. Where does font size go from that? Did font size just disappear? Font size 18. Hello. So yeah, everything is working. So we now have our new. Okay, so what have we noticed there? We can make as many of these extra files as we like. So we've got buttons here, and we have got our buttons here to be able to import it, so we can have as many of these as we need. This one, so in reality, we could actually have one called something like headings, and these get compiled when we do when Webpacker makes the there we go. So these files get made when Webpacker compiles the Tailwind. So we don't really care about having loads of them, I don't think, because we basically just end up with one CSS file. So then in our headings, oh, I've made a folder rather than a file. I'm an idiot. Don't need that. We want a file. And then we can just paste that in, and we actually had a heading one, I think, on the home page. So again, we should then see this recompile again. So if we go back here, go to our, oh, where was it? Oh, I think it was on the next page from here. I thought we had a heading somewhere. Ah, okay, so it's recompiling now. Oh, I see. So we get this slow turbo links loader thingy across here because the server is doing the recompile. Which takes ages. Okay, so this was our heading that we randomly threw in somewhere. Yep, so that's our H1. And 225. These come through as being on in the actual view, which is weird. Where are they actually being set? Is that just a Safari thing? Hang on, let me go grab a Chrome tab. I have a Chrome tab somewhere. Okay. The reason I've stopped using Chrome for streams is that they keep showing your search history whenever you click in the address bar, which I don't have anything scary in my search history, but there might be like, it's shared across browsers and stuff, so you might be doing work or client stuff. You can't opt out of it. It was an experimental flag for a while that you could opt out of, and now you can't turn it off. So it's just something you know. Come on, Google, like, you don't want to do that. So what do I want to load up this localhost here, and then I want to inspect it, and I want to find out where this button is getting its styles from. Oh no, sorry, it was the heading on the other one, wasn't it? So test. It was this heading. Oh, that's working. Interesting. Okay, so it's a Safari issue. So Chrome, is that something to do with the source maps, do we think? Do I have trouble running Ruby on Rails on MacBooks with an Apple One processor? Can you reply by typing? I do not know English. So let me come back to that in the chat. I'll come back to the M1 Rails stuff. Just responding to the chat. So the Chrome browser is able to show us the right partial that we are working on, and Safari isn't. Why is that? Because it's really annoying. So if you can see what I mean here, what we have on Safari is that the H1 here has got the name of the view, which is /welcome/account/new, and then line 751. But Chrome has actually correctly told us when we go to the H1 that it comes from underscore headings. And so it's obviously able to generate that. So let's just take a look. Safari. Well, let's check it with Tailwind. Can't see source. I don't know what I'm Googling here really. Tailwind CSS source. I guess it must include Safari. Okay, nothing's popping up there. I'm not sure it is the source map. I think I am showing the wrong thing. In the debugger, command click on whatever symbol you want to look at and it should do it. Source, okay, see if that does it. I'm just taking a look to see if there's a... Nope, it's still taking me through to new. It doesn't seem to have that understanding of going to the kind of underlying correct place. Okay, well, we can worry about that later. I'm interested in that because I have been using Safari a lot more recently. Okay, so that is Tailwind, and we have got our @apply directive working. We have got a couple of these new partials. So we also have looked at how to use components for things like this. So using the view component gem that we added last week, what we might then try and do is make a button component that would get us working. So I'm going to wrap this stream here. I'm going to respond to the comment in things. I'll be here a few more minutes. But what I am going to do this afternoon, if you are interested in this Tailwind front end stuff, I've got my new mic arriving in a couple of hours. I think it's due here in about 1-ish. So late this afternoon, what I'm going to do is probably jump onto Figma and spend some time in design, and then we can look at how we tie those together with Tailwind as well. So we're going to do 2 streams in a day. We'll just do an extra homework edition today just to test out the new mic. Very excited. And we will get that up and running, and then kind of hopefully have more of a kind of full experience. I know we've basically spent a lot of time talking about UI rather than just building it, but we at least got a very lovely pinkish button now. But we haven't really got design to work to, so once we've got that, then we can just put it all together and it'll be more visually cool. Okay, so let's take a look. We had a question came through about the running Rails on MacBooks with Apple M1 processors. I don't have an M1 processor yet, and I am probably going to delay getting one, just seeing what other people are doing because of Homebrew and a bunch of other stuff there. But people do seem to have been having pretty good experiences. The gentleman who works on Bullet Train, I think I follow on Twitter, and he seems to have been having a good experience. So let's go and take a look. I can't remember his name. Bullet Train Rails author, Twitter. I guess the problem with Bullet Train and Andrew Culver. Okay. So I think my memory is that I had seen him talking about having an M1 and doing Rails stuff on it. Yep. So interestingly, he is. We did looking at Vue component last week. He's been doing some work with partials, which I think is worth looking at. Never looked at anyone's Twitter stream on here before. Yeah, so he has got the M1, but hasn't specifically mentioned doing anything about it with Rails. So I'll find some links and post some links to that in the chat. So let me just respond to that really quickly in the chat. I will find some Rails M1 links and I'll add them to the description of this later on. Cool. Okay, so join us back. Let me jump over here. Cool. So join us back this afternoon to take a look at Figma and also to take a look at some more CSS stuff. And I hope that was useful for people. We covered a bunch of Tailwind stuff. Also, we covered some Devise and testing stuff at the start of the stream, which I think will be useful to people because that stung me a few times just even on this project. And have a lovely day, everyone. Bye.